But no, I was just saying to Rosina, actually, I watched the movie literally just this morning, and I thought you were absolutely brilliant in it. It was such a great. I mean, it's a great character and a great. You can tell it's such a fascinating way to kind of sort of tell the story of Frankenstein, but through this prism of Mary Shelley's life. I thought it was a really great film. But I'm going to begin my first sort of question. Really, it's just a bit of a boring one to start with, but what it was that attracted you to this project. What was the main draw for you?
Lead role.
Always helps.
I don't know. No, what attracted me to the project? I mean, look, it's a story about Mary Shelley, and I'm a British actress. I mean, you know, any actress from any country in the world would give an arm and a leg to play Mary Shelley, but I think especially as a Brit, because she's this British icon, right? And then I get this gorgeous script through that's very powerful, very delicate, very fragile, quite horrific in places and horrifying. That's aside from the actual horror elements of the film. And I just thought, I mean, this is fucking great. Where do I sign up? You know, and I auditioned just like everyone else. And when they offered me the role, I mean, I jumped at it. It was a complete no-brainer. So, yeah.
How is it having, because obviously it's not just a kind of a leading role, but I mean, you're in almost every single scene. It must have been quite I mean, obviously incredibly fulfilling experience.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. But because the character is, like you said, there are some challenging moments and some very nuanced, internalized display. I just wondered if, because you kind of had to get into that headspace for so many hours every day, if it was quite tiring just emotionally on by the end of the shoot.
It was definitely tiring. You know, it was a month shoot, and I was incredibly regimented, like at the end of the day, and also with my weekends. So generally speaking, we would get 2 days off, and one day I wouldn't speak to anyone, you know, back home, because we shot it in New York and my family's in London, and I wouldn't speak to anyone. It was generally on a Saturday. I wouldn't speak to anyone, and I would just do all my laundry, all my prep for the coming week, tidy my room, feel human, kind of put myself back together. And then Sunday would be the one day off where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to call my mom and that kind of stuff. But I had to be very disciplined, you know. And my trick for that is that I write out every single line that I have in the film, and I stick it around my hotel room or my bathroom or wherever, so that I'm constantly thinking, okay, where is she in the journey? What just happened? Right, tomorrow you're doing that scene. Okay, but what happened before that scene? Oh, that happened. So even when you're brushing your teeth, you're constantly thinking about it, and it really helps to keep track of what you're going through.
I like this idea. I always thought it was only like crazed detectives in movies that would put plaster things all over the walls.
And me.
And you.
Me.
Yeah. How much? I mean, obviously, you mentioned the kind of how much of an icon Mary Shelley is, but how much of her life is there? We know so much of her through her words, you know, through her writing. But how much did you have to go on, just in terms of like biographies? You know, kind of like actually getting into her life, not just the life of the character she writes about.
Of course. Well, there's this amazing biography written by a woman called Charlotte Gordon, called I think it's Hopeless Romantics or Desperate Romantics. I can't remember the title, but it's something by Charlotte Gordon, and it's about Mary Shelley and Mary's mother, who is Mary Wollstonecraft. And one chapter is dedicated to Mary Shelley, the next to Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley. And it's a chunky sized book, and basically that was the bedrock of what I was looking at for Mary's journey in the film. And what I loved about the film that Nora wrote, Nora Unkel is the writer-director, what she did that was so fucking smart is she took the truth of Mary's life, like miscarriage, death, you know, it was she had a horrible time with children, really difficult, really traumatizing. And Nora takes what actually happens and she weaves it throughout the film as a sort of, you know, possible explanation for how Mary came up with Frankenstein, basically, amongst other things that happen. I hope I haven't given too much away, but I mean, that's quite widely known that, you know, Mary Shelley lost 3 children and only 1 survived. That's pretty bleak if you think about it.
Yeah. How was it working with Nora? Because this is one of those films where when you're kind of watching it, I almost had to pause it a couple of times. It would have been lovely to sit in a cinema, but at least I've got my pause button, because I kind of had to pause it and just kind of go, wow, so that parallel to that, and it's one of those films that has many kind of intricacies, doesn't it? And I just thought a really quite intelligent screenplay. I just wondered about what it was like to collaborate with someone who's obviously got such a wise mind.
She's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful. I mean, we met and it was kind of love at first sight. First of all, she took me for lunch, and that's the key to my heart, is feeding.
Such a good start. Yeah.
So she took me to lunch, and we had like a 3-hour lunch, and we spoke about everything. And then we had a few days, maybe actually we had a week of kind of workshopping before we started filming, actually, in New York. So costume fittings, makeup fittings, and workshopping with the director and changing anything that kind of we felt was a bit sticky or didn't quite work. But she's such a smart, intuitive, sensitive woman. And almost every suggestion that I made, she said yes to. And some of them were pretty bold. You know, there are some things, I won't ruin it here, but there are certainly some things that you will have seen in the film that you may have gone, oh, that's unusual. And that might well have been something that either I suggested or Nora suggested in a workshop situation that kind of came up. And it works, you know, we're kind of two peas in a pod. And she's wonderful. I'm very excited to see what she does next. And I really hope she takes me with her, because I'd work with her again in a heartbeat without even thinking about it.
Yeah, it sounds great as well to be given that kind of collaboration aspect, because I guess a lot of filmmakers, they'll have this very specific idea, and I'm sure she did, but it sounds like she was very open to your input as well.
She was. I mean, time and budget permitting, obviously, because it's, you know, it's an indie movie. So time and money are both precious commodities on such film. But she was really open to it. And actually, to give everyone their credit, you know, all of the actors were, everyone was lovely. We worked very much in harmony together. We genuinely got along. We were all staying in this terrifying, huge haunted house that really was like a terrifying standalone haunted house built in the 1700s that was called the Old Post Office. It was really freaky, with a really big basement. And, you know, so we actually all got along very, very well, you know. We were very lucky, very lucky.
Yeah, because I was wondering about, because if you've ever not quite to the degree as Mary Shelley, but have you ever written, or do you have any kind of outside of kind of acting? Like I know a lot of kind of actors, when they're kind of in between jobs, they might paint or they might write stuff. I just wondered if you had a kind of something creative you do in the in between.
I definitely write a lot of poetry, because that's kind of my thing that I love. I write a lot of poetry. I obsessively tidy, and I know this sounds weird, but it's because I feel like the more tidy and zen my exterior is, the more tidy and zen my interior will feel. So I'm not sure if that's a creative outlet, but I spend a lot of time making sure that things are organized around me, predominantly so I can deal with the chaos of being an actor. You know, I mean, today I've done an audition, this interview, I've got an audition afterwards. It's a strange job being an actor. You're not always sure what it is, you know, especially nowadays. You know, this may look great, but I'm literally wearing the most disgusting tomato sauce splattered jeans underneath that you can't see. So, you know, it's a strange time to be an actor.
I haven't worn a pair of jeans for months. I'm just doing all of these interviews, like looking relatively smart up into my waist, and then just tracksuit bottoms. I
love the pink though. The pink looks great.
Thank you very much.
It does look smart. I fell for it. I fell for it.
There we go. But yeah, because I've always had this chat with my wife, because it was I'm one of those people, a bit like what you were saying about having like a nice tidy atmosphere to make sure I work better. I'm one of those people that really likes order, and then I decided to choose a job as a freelancer, which is like the complete opposite to everything that I kind of like in my life. And obviously you mentioned being an actor comes about with a lot of chaos. How do you balance that kind of, it sounds like someone who maybe likes a bit of order and like a kind of calmness and cleanness, then with the kind of chaotic spontaneity of acting?
I mean, I think it's almost impossible, and you kind of have to just ride it out and find out what works for you. What do I do that I'm trying to think, what do I actually do that helps? I try to commit to doing my job really well. So I try to commit to like sending your auditions on time, make sure they're not late. You know, yes, Alex, you do need to put makeup on for a Zoom interview. That's a non-negotiable. And, you know, things like I tried to do that job, that little bit of my job, really well. And then the thing I love the most about acting in the whole wide world is that when you're actually doing it, when you're actually acting, a bit like when you're actually painting, or maybe writing a piece in your case, for example, or doing an interview, it's just being in flow, man. Like, just forget it all. So, okay, yes, in my hotel rooms and bathrooms across the world, I've got, you know, the shooting schedule and I've got all my lines written out and I'm completely in that space. But between action and cut, it's like, fuck it all, throw it out the window and see what happens, because that's where the magic is. And in that instance, you have to trust your gut. And that is where the magic is. You know, that is like the bit of beauty that people call flow, you know, and you have to cling on to that for dear life.
Yeah. Well, talking of magic, how was it working? Because I was sort of looking sort of over your credits, and I thought I loved what you did in The Wife, which was a great film a couple of years ago. And yeah, working with Glenn Close. I mean, how was that kind of experience? I mean, she's one of the greats, so that must have been great to work, not just work with her, but work very closely with her and share that type of bond on screen.
Well, she was amazing because. So first of all, I'd always loved her. I had always loved her, like ever since I was a child, and I just felt this affinity with her. I was like, that's my woman. That's my woman. That she's great. That's what I want to be like. And then I get this job, and of course you're like, pinch me. This is ridiculous, you know. And my mother helped me read the scenes on the self-tape. So my mum's like, I'm as good as Glenn Close. I am as good as Glenn Close. That's why Alix got the part. I'm as good as Glenn Close. So my mother's very pleased with herself. And then I get up to Glasgow to shoot with Glenn. And I just remember on like day 2 or 3, there's a big scene that is in the house. So John Price has just been given the Nobel Prize for Literature. They're having a big party. And in the scene, Glenn, at one point, she just put her head on my shoulder. During the take, she was like, oh, I love you so much, or whatever she was saying. You know, she was like snuggling up to me like mother, like daughter. And this siren went off in my head in the take going, fucking hell, Glenn Close has just put her head on my shoulder. Fuck, this is amazing. Play it cool, play it cool. So I was like, I don't know if the camera got any of that, but I was like, my whole body just went, oh! And I remember it was this shoulder. You see, I have this physical memory in my body. That's where Glenn's head was, because it was the coolest moment of my life. And she was just amazing. She was really warm. She's quite quiet, but also very funny with her quietness, you know, in real life. And she's very quirky, which I really like. And she's got a real set of balls on her as well, like Pisces woman. You know, she's strong. I like that.
And because with The Wife, and now this as well, with A Nightmare Way, it's good to see you on in front of a screen. Because I guess with your career, a lot of it has been moved into the kind of voiceover work for kind of video games and stuff. I just wondered, does that show in a kind of exciting way just how this industry and career can be so much about seeing where the wind blows and kind of seeing where it takes you? I guess you might go in with a kind of game plan at the start and go, right, I want to do this, this, and this, and actually find yourself kind of being moved in certain areas or doing one thing that leads on to more stuff. And I think that's quite an exciting aspect of it. But is that something you've always quite enjoyed, that kind of where your career's kind of taken you?
I mean, I'm probably more of a control freak than that, so I'd love to have a bit more control. But I have to be honest. Look, I have learned so much through acting in video games, because I think that the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that you could be on a film for a week or 2 weeks. You could be on a huge film for 4 to 5 months. But when you're doing the lead in a video game, you really almost certainly are in the studio for 4 to 5 months, 4 to 5 days a week, for 4 to 5 hours at a time, you know? And then when you're doing your pickups and your DLCs, which is downloadable content, you're talking a year and a half of work, 2 years of work when you've added it all up. As an acting exercise, that's quite an extraordinary journey to go on with your character, you know, to maintain that level of consistency. And I went to drama school. I did all the singing lessons. I did that. The biggest training that I've ever had in the use of my voice, which is what stage actors in particular go on a lot about, is video games. There's nothing like it as a training. You know, if someone says you can only act with your voice, most people kind of shit themselves, and rightly so. It's hard. You know, it's nice to have a costume and a hair and makeup and all of that. but there's an extraordinary thing about being forced to just use one part of your instrument, you know, which I've loved. It's taught me a lot, and I use a lot of those skills on screen, whether it's whether it's acting with an accent, so accent work, or, you know, learning how to be more intimate, things, little tricks that stage and screen actors pick up along the way. But a lot of those I got from video games, you know.
Yeah, it must be quite strange as well, because I guess you could walk down, well, maybe not Oxford Street now because obviously with lockdown, but if you walk down Oxford Street a year ago, you'd probably walk past what every 1 in 3 people has probably heard your voice. You know, that's is that quite strange to know that kind of like you could walk down the street sometimes and think that people might not necessarily recognize you, but probably about 50% of this city has probably heard my voice at some point.
Very strange. Whenever I'm feeling really down about my career or myself or whatever's gone wrong, my mum's like, do you realize how many people have heard your voice? And actually I was shooting a little thing for BBC Two just before Christmas, and we're filming it, so I was like, yeah, I'm on camera. And as we're filming, it was the 10th of December, and all these buses were driving past, all these buses, and I was like, oh, Cyberpunk, and eventually the director's like, why do you keep saying Cyberpunk? And I'm like, oh, it's a game that I'm in, it's released today. And he's like, I've just seen 10 buses in the last 15 minutes and you're in that. And I'm like, yeah, I play Keanu Reeves' girlfriend. Yeah. He's like, what? You play Keanu Reeves' girlfriend? I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be a big deal. I really think it's going to go somewhere, you know? So.
And the good thing is as well about all these video games is that they don't really have to stop, because I guess that what you do in that booth is kind of socially distanced as it is. So I guess this last year has probably been able to, well, has it carried on as normal on that front?
Look, it's definitely tricky at the beginning, and I had to act really quickly, and I built a booth for myself, a small little thing, but that works very, very well. And we were doing pickups for Cyberpunk, Ghost Recon, and Amnesia Rebirth, all of which were released at some point towards the end of 2020. But it kind of blew my mind that I'd gone from being in these huge studios in LA or these huge studios in London doing Cyberpunk, for example, listening to Keanu Reeves's lines. And now I'm, you know, in a corner of my office, you know, with this makeshift booth, and those lines went in the game. That kind of blows my mind a little bit, like that technology can do that.
Yeah. Well, because I find it kind of mad that I've been speaking to some filmmakers and they finished shooting just before lockdown, but they've put the whole film together in their bedrooms basically, and they're in like mini offices at home, like editing. Yeah. They've made these editing suites and watch films on like Netflix and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah. But talking of lockdown, am I right in thinking you've made you're part of a little movie called Lockdown that kind of looks into that side of things?
Yes, yeah. I have literally, that's also actually my voice. That was my friend Bizarre is making, he's a writer director and he's made it. And he needed a social justice warrior. I think I banned him from using that term in the end. I think I was like, you can't call me that. But he was basically looking for a very feisty American woman to kind of hold the lead guy to task, hold the lead guy to account. And I get to do that in a kind of blistering scene that happens. You just hear my voice, but she gets she lands some good punches onto the lead guy, who's like this horrible kind of misogynistic white supremacist guy, basically, from, you know, keyboard warrior style during a lockdown, basically thinking he, you know, runs the world.
So what I think, so what's, you know, you mentioned you've been doing a couple of kind of auditions today. How's 2021 looking for you at the moment? Because I know 2020 had this kind of, I mean, if I interviewed anyone at the start of the year, there was everything was being paused and changed and stuff. But are you getting a sense that things are starting to get a bit more structure again? And now if someone was to give you a role, that they're not empty promises like they might have been a year ago, where we all thought, well, that's going to get closed down. Do you feel like the industry is recovering slightly?
I think it is. I think what's really difficult, and I really feel for producers on this, and, you know, my friends who are kind of in production, is that due to one person getting sick, due to, you know, a visa post-Brexit not coming through, things can be halted so quickly, and there's so much money on the line and for them. And I feel like it's still quite a precarious position for artists and actors in particular to be in. There are definitely productions, you know, up and running, like my partner is a COVID safety manager for Netflix, and it's his job to keep the set and everyone safe. But of course, even that's an impossible task because, as he always says, COVID doesn't care. And he's just like, COVID doesn't care if you're a AAA actor or whatever. COVID literally doesn't care how many Oscars you have. As we know with Tom Hanks being one of the first who got it.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
Well, of course, Tom Hanks is like the first famous person to overcome COVID. Of course. Yeah.
But so I feel like things are, what I love is I feel like people are really enthusiastic to get the ball rolling, and I really respect that. So there's a lot of auditions, which is great, but I also feel like there's a lot of decisions being delayed because you just can't put all your eggs in one basket because of COVID at the moment.
Yeah. But yeah, so my final question was obviously, well, mentioning the fact that you are in London, but you've shot in New York, and it sounds like you played American in the lockdown film. Have you ever given much thought or considered maybe moving to America or trying anything in America? Or are you considering, obviously, you've been brought up and live in one of the biggest media hubs in the world? Are you quite settled in London?
I'm definitely a Londoner born and bred. I'm a Londoner born and bred. I love traveling for work. I've shot in Morocco, I've shot in Montreal, I've shot in New York, I've shot in LA, I've shot loads of places. And I love that. Prague, like I love going to places like Prague or Budapest for work. That's a fantastic part of the job. But I am fundamentally a Londoner. And I will always travel for my work because I love traveling for work. But London's just, I remember once I'd spent like a year and a bit in LA, and I came back and I was in a taxi going home from the airport back to my flat. And I was looking around, I was like, it's so beautiful. It was the most dark, disgusting, dull, grey, wet London day you've ever seen. And the driver was like, really? Really, this is your idea of, I was like, it's beautiful. Look at the architecture. It's so old. I think we're driving through Southall. It wasn't even like the prettiest part of London. I was just like, no disrespect to people who live in Southall, but and it was just hilarious. I was like, it's amazing. I love it. And he was like, I think you're on drugs, lady. But because I'd been in LA, which had been so big and rigid and kind of sanitized in some ways for such a long time, something about the grit of London that gets under your skin.
Yeah, do you know what? Fuck the sun. I don't want the sun. I want a bit of rain.
We don't love vitamin D.
Yeah, I don't need. It's overrated anyway, being sunny and tanned all the time. Yeah. But it's been a pleasure speaking to you today, Alix. Thank you so much for your time.
So much. It was really lovely to meet you. I hope we get to do this again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, take care. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey